Hello my friends, welcome back to another week of painting. I hope you're all keeping very well out there. This week I just want to run through a couple of my things that I use for painting, give you a couple of hints and tips, that kind of stuff, just to explain to you what I use and how I use it, what thinners I use, that kind of thing. And then we'll move on to a nice little painting. A nice simple subject going back to very basics. A simple little bit of a sunset with the sun and some kind of tall dark grasses. I have a photograph here I'm going to show you. This is just kind of going right back to basics. I think that's quite nice. Just to show you how to grade your canvas from one colour to the next without getting mucky and that kind of thing. So just a nice simple painting for you beginners out there. Okay, first of all I'm going to run through the type of things I use. First of all, paints. Paints are very important. You can use very cheap paints as a beginner just to get you started. They're absolutely fine. I've used them in the past when I was just starting as well. Absolutely fine. But I would suggest moving on to a more intermediate brand of paint or a type of paint. So something that's not too expensive but not too cheap either. Something around the middle is just absolutely perfect, really. That's all you need. I use Georgian. I'll show you. Let me get a couple here. These are the paints I use. Georgian oil. Okay, they're a kind of a British brand, but they were used right back as far as the old masters. They all kind of used Georgian. Doyler, Roney. I also use Winton, but I mean these are a very good budget paint, and this is what I use for all my paintings. I find it's not particularly, it's not the type of quality of paint that you use, but it's how you use it, if you know what I mean. You're mixing, that kind of thing. These are relatively cheap. This big tube, they come in smaller tubes like this. This big tube is 10 euros, okay? I think it's 12 euros maybe. This would last me 6 months, maybe longer, depending on how much you paint. I paint every 2 or 3 days. I've had this tube maybe 3 months so far, and it's still pretty much full. Look, it's almost full because I only use a little bit. Try to go for a decent quality. Winton is also very good. Now, recently I've been using a new brand which was gifted to me by a very good friend of mine and viewer. Old Holland paints. Don't know if I can zoom in on that now. Old Holland. They're absolutely beautiful to use. They're quite expensive, but they're very rich in pigments, and the tiniest little bit goes very far. That's what I love about these paints. The tiniest little bit is all you need, but they're very good quality. I'm going to paint this painting with those paints, Old Holland, but I typically, normally for my everyday painting, use Georgian. Now you can mix the two brands. You can mix different brands of paints together, no problem, as long as they're oil based. You cannot mix an oil based paint with a water mixable oil paint. They just won't go. Oil and spirits don't mix. Okay, oil and water, they don't mix. So whatever you're using, you can actually use the water-based oils as well. They're very good. I've tried them out in the past. I just didn't like the texture and the feel. The way they cover the canvas is just different to the normal oil-based paints. So if you want low odor, you can try water-based. They're fine, but I prefer the oil-based kind of student quality paints. They keep their colours, the richness of the colours stay there for longer. They don't fade or anything like that. So that's paints, and only a few colours. Don't go crazy. I've seen some artists put 15 different colours or 20 different colours on their palette. It's too confusing, I find. I prefer to use just 1 or 2 of each shade. Most of the time I'll use 1 blue, I'll use 1 red, I'll use 1 brown. A lot of people out there, they use 2 or 3 different shades of yellow, red, green, blue, brown, and it's just overwhelming. My normal palette will consist of maybe 6 colours, 7 colours, and you can paint pretty much any shade with those colours. So that's what I would say to start off small. Thinners. I get a lot of questions on my channel about thinners and how I clean my brushes and how I thin my paints and all of that. It's very simple really. Turpentine. I have a very old bottle of turpentine here, okay? Regular artist's turpentine or decorators turpentine, as long as it's just real turpentine. You can use that on its own as a medium to thin your paints and paint on your canvas. It's absolutely fine. But what I like to do is mix a little linseed oil. There we go, linseed oil. Just this big tin of linseed oil probably lasts me 2 years, okay? What I do with linseed oil is I'll make my own medium. So I will put the 80% turpentine in an old bottle, okay? This is an old bottle, it's years old. 80% turpentine and then the rest in linseed oil. Give it a good shake and that's a lovely thinners because it's oily, okay? As I said, you don't have to use linseed oil, but I just find putting a little linseed oil into your turpentine, it just helps the paint move more freely on the canvas. It's nice and flowy and kind of oily, but not too oily. It's just the right medium for me. Everyone is different, but that's what I find works for me. I think it's just a lovely combination. Now, when I'm putting oil on the canvas, a lot of people would say liquid clear or liquid white. I don't use liquid white or liquid clear. You can use liquid clear, but I find liquid clear is just a little bit too oily for me. It's too wet. I just get a bit of tissue and I dab a little linseed oil on its own, on some tissue like this, and I give the canvas a quick rub with that linseed oil, a very thin layer. That just makes the canvas nice and kind of slippery, but not very slippery. It's just enough to help the paint blend together nicely. I'll show you in this in a minute. That's what I use, but don't overdo it. A tiny bit is all you need, okay? A little tiny bit of linseed oil for your canvas. I do it only kind of on big skies and big areas. If it's something with lots of different little aspects to a painting, then I won't use it. But it's only if I'm painting one big large sky, we'll say, or an ocean or something like that, just to get the blending nice. That's the only reason. Sometimes I don't even need to use it if it's a small canvas, but for this I will, just to show you. Brushes. I use all my brushes are soft, semi-synthetic brushes. They're just regular, cheap, synthetic, flat brushes, okay? Do you know those kind of ones with the orange hair? You know those kind of ones, don't you? You see them in every art store. Now, I have a couple of sets which were gifted to me as well. They're very good quality, but they're the very same. Just normal, simple, soft, synthetic hair, okay? Very soft brushes. Any regular cheap brushes will do absolutely fine. That's all I use. I don't go to the trouble, I don't purchase very expensive, you know, fully synthetic, you know, oil painting brushes. I don't buy expensive brushes. Regular cheap brushes are absolutely fine. It just depends on how you use them. That's all it is. All my brushes are synthetic except for my fan brush, okay? That's just a normal bristle fan brush. I use a bristle for my fan. That's all. Everything else is just regular soft, look, regular soft cheap brushes. Absolutely fine. That's all you need. You don't have to go to huge expense. That's my brushes. I use a couple of different shaped palette knives, but you can experiment with those yourself. I find this one very handy for getting crisp, sharp lines, etc. But a couple of different shapes is fine. That's all you need. I also use, and I get into trouble for this, a foundation brush, believe it or not. I suppose you could call it a kind of a mop brush in the art world, but it's just a simple, cheap foundation brush for the ladies. That's all for softening colours together on my canvas. It's lovely and soft, very soft hair. Any shape, any size you like, just want that soft hair, perfect. You know, my wife picks up hundreds of these things and they're never used. So I just pop up the cupboard and I take one or two. She doesn't even know they're gone, I'll be honest. But they're brilliant, brilliant for softening colours together. That's what I use. That's all. A bit of tissue for drying. When I'm cleaning my brushes, let me show you very quickly. The mistake a lot of beginners make when they're oil painting is they put their brush into the jar of turpentine and they swish it up like this to clean their brush. That's completely wrong, because when you've done that, you've completely ruined all your thinners, your medium. It's just gone bad. All the colour has gone into your thinners, and you can't really use it again. What I do is, if I paint on my brush and I want to clean it, I just dip into my turpentine once, in and out like this, and I leave the tissue soak off the paint. That's what I do, like this. Just kind of leave it soak into the tissue. And just, if you have to do this 2 or 3 times, just keep doing it. But just dip in and out quickly, and then the tissue will take off all that paint and soak it up. That's what I do. That's all I do when I clean my brushes. And when I finish my painting completely, then I will just put some turpentine in a big jar or something and give my brushes a good swish around, clean them all, and just dab them on some tissue, make them nice and dry again, and then stand them upright in a jar or down flat. It doesn't matter. That's just the way I am. I'm very easygoing with things like that. I don't have a specific way I have to do something all the time. Just give them a wash in some turpentine, dry them very well, and put them to one side, and they're done, finished. That's it. That's all the basic stuff you need. Canvases, I just use regular cheap canvases, stretched canvases. But what I find with the cheaper canvases when you buy them, they can be quite rough. They can be like sandpaper, can't they? When they're primed. They're just primed very cheaply, that's all. What I do is I take some sandpaper. I should have some here somewhere, okay? A bit of fine sandpaper, anything at all. And I'll just give my raw canvas, my new canvas, a quick rub, like this, okay? Just a very, very fast rub, and you'll notice immediately it's smoother. But you can use that. The problem is your paint will dry and soak into that canvas very quickly, and you will get patches, dry patches, and they can be very annoying. What I do with almost all my canvases when I buy them, I rub them lightly, then I give them a coat of regular, cheap, household undercoat, white, water-based undercoat. I take a tin of that, I pour half into a separate tin, so you have 2 half tins. I then fill them with water. So you end up with a nice 2 big full tins of primer. Fill them with water, so half water, half undercoat, okay? 50-50. Mix them up really well, and it's lovely and thin and creamy. And I just use that, I give it 1 coat on my canvas, I let it dry, and it's perfect as an undercoat. But just let it dry well for a couple of hours. And that's a perfect undercoat. You'll find when you paint on that, your paint is sitting on top for much longer. It's not soaking in immediately. So you have plenty of time then for blending and coming back a few hours later, or even 1 or 2 days later, and changing and softening colours together again. It just gives you that extra bit of time. Now you can, if you wish, buy more expensive canvases. They are primed really well and they are lovely to work on. However, they're very expensive, really very expensive. So if you're trying to kind of, watch your costs and save as much money as you can, just buy cheap canvases and prime them. Because I find they're almost better than an expensive canvas. When you prime them and give them 1 coat of undercoat, they almost feel better than a really expensive canvases. So it's much more cost effective to do it that way, I find. Especially if you're buying bigger canvases. So just buy big canvases cheap and prime them. It saves you an awful lot of money in the long run. But I use these for tutorials. They're very handy because they're cheap and I can use them for tutorials for that. If I was doing big commissions, I would purchase an expensive canvas, proper canvas. But these are absolutely fine for most of your paintings. Absolutely fine. So use them. Don't be shy. That's it, really. That's it. I have a ceramic tile for my palette just for my tutorials because it's white, it's easy to clean, It doesn't fade or scratch or anything like that. It's just a normal white bathroom tile, so to speak. So that's what I use for my tutorials, but I use a timber wooden, normal wooden one that you hold for my regular painting. If I'm painting something myself, outdoors or whatever, a nice big wooden palette is fantastic. So that's my setup. That's really the basics of the painting. That's all you need. Just use cheap materials. Don't go crazy spending loads of money on fancy, expensive brushes and palettes and paints. Unless, of course, you have the capabilities of purchasing expensive equipment, but I don't. I'm just an average guy, you know, trying to pay my bills and pay a mortgage, keep a roof over my head, my family's head, and just get by. So I don't have the huge, you know, financial side to be able to go out and buy expensive equipment and so and so. So I just use basic equipment, and it's done me for the last 30 years, and I still do it that way because I'm comfortable with my techniques. Let's go and show you some of those techniques on a canvas. So I hope that's helped you in your endeavours with learning to paint, and you know, even the amateurs out there who've been doing it for a while, you might, you know, try one or two of those little things. I think they'd help. Just try them. Let's go on and have a bit of fun with this painting. I think this will turn out quite nice. I'm going to keep it simple, just show you a few different techniques and not too many colours. All right, I'll be right back. So here is my canvas and my palette. There's a reference photograph. Nice simple photograph. Eye-catching, nice colours, just simple. Let's try something simple for a change. Let's go right back to basics, okay? Nothing too extreme here. I'll tell you what colours I have. I'm using the Old Holland colours, okay? I've burned, let's start here. Titanium white, Naples yellow, cadmium yellow, burnt sienna. In fact, I don't think I'm going to need burnt sienna. I don't think I will. I have some magenta. I have French ultramarine, which I haven't used in years, and some lamp black. I think that's all I need to use. It's just a few colours. This is my canvas, primed and ready to go. And I'm just going to take a bit of lead from an old broken pencil. Look, just fell off. It just fell out of a pencil one day. It's fine. Put a little line across the bottom here. That's where we're coming down as far as. Okay, there we go. Let's start painting. I'm going to take a large brush. Oh yes, I said, didn't I was going to oil this. So I'm just going to tear off a little bit of tissue paper and get my linseed oil. Okay, and look, I only have a little bit. Let's just dab that with some linseed oil. Rub that on very lightly. And I'll be honest now, this canvas you're looking at is an old painting. It's a very old painting which I just did not like. I've had it for years, just thrown in the corner. So I primed over the painting again with a couple of coats, and I'm just reusing the canvas for a tutorial. Handy, isn't it? I'm going to go right in now with a large brush. Look, this is a large brush, 1.5 inch, whatever that is in centimetres, I'm not sure. It's just a nice wide brush. You can see the shape with my hand, the size, look. Let me just put this on clear focus so it doesn't keep zooming. I'm going to start at the top. So just don't overthink your colours. It's simply a very light blue, but it's kind of a warm blue. There's a bit of pink in there. So I'm just going to dampen this very gently, dry it very well. Let's go into some titanium white. Then let's go into some French ultramarine. Now, I haven't used this colour in years. I normally use Phaylo blue. If you're following me long enough, you'll know I always use Phaylo blue as my blue. But French ultramarine, let's try it. Just to be, because they're basic colours that you can buy in a kit, okay? You can buy these in a set, for example. French ultramarine blue and a tiny touch of magenta. And I don't want to go too pinky with this. There's a bit more blue than magenta in here. Now this is nice and thick and creamy, look. If you find this too thick, I'll just take a tiny touch of thinners with the corner of my brush and just dab it in quickly and take a tiny bit off, just to thin it slightly. What you want is a nice kind of a thick, creamy consistency. Shall we go and try this and see how it looks? Now, on camera, that looks much lighter. I think it's because there's a lot of light overhead shining down on the canvas. It's quite a sunny day outside and there's a lot of light coming through the windows at the moment. So this probably will look on camera slightly lighter in shade. So I'm just going to keep going back and checking. Okay, I think a little darker, yes. But this does definitely seem much lighter on camera, because I can see the screen on my camera and it does look very bright, I'll be honest, the colour. I'm going to just darken that ever so slightly. And I'm going to come right down now to about a third, let's say, third of the way. And then I'm going to start adding more magenta. So as it comes down, I'm going to just take more thinners. I'm going to pick up more magenta. And then a little blue. So basically, we started off with a kind of a blue shade. I'm now going into a kind of a pinky-ish shade. You see that? A slightly pinky-ish shade. Not very pink now, okay? Because we're going to soften these together where they meet and create a nice gradient from top to bottom. I'm kind of dragging these colours in together now. Look, you can see that. I'm dragging them together. And then I'd say we can come right down with that pinky shade, come right down all the way, almost to the bottom. So I'm going to just keep mixing plenty of magenta, tiny touch of French ultramarine, a little bit of white. The white gives it that kind of thick pasty feel, okay? And you can see how the oil on the canvas is really helping this. You see how the oil is just allowing that to really soften across, and it's not kind of drying into the canvas too much. And this is quite a kind of a thin shade that I'm using now, I'll be honest. I'm going to go up like this and drag those two shades together in a crisscross and then straight across. That gives you a lovely gradient. Now as it comes down, it's getting very rich, isn't it? I think I should have put some cadmium red, but we don't need cadmium red. I'll show you why. If we take some magenta and some burnt sienna, those two colours will give us a lovely rich colour. But you know, I might need some cadmium red in a moment, because we don't want this too pinky. A little bit more sienna, so we get that kind of rich browny pink shade. Let's just bring that across the bottom like this first, okay? And then I'm going to take a little magenta and a tiny touch of Phaylo, French ultramarine, but more pink. I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to now soften that up into the blue. So basically we have a light blue, a pink, and then a rich dark pink. And just kind of bring them all together as best as you can, and just allow them all to soften together and go up at an angle like this and then go down like this. That brings all the colours together. And I'm just using the very tip of my brush, okay? I'm being very gentle, allowing them all to kind of mix together to create that lovely gradient from top to bottom. And there's no kind of deep lines going across. Now you can just keep mixing this as much or as little as you like until you're happy. So that's the kind of effect I'm going for. Now I think it needs a bit more pink. I can see on the photograph there's this very kind of rich, deep pink colour sort of around the sun, so to speak. I'm just going to go around like this and then soften it away. And again, soften it up into that lighter shade. And you just keep going until you feel you've achieved what you want, until you feel like, yeah, that's just what I need. You keep going. You can go as long as you want with this, okay? There's no kind of set time or rule or anything like that. You can keep going. It's up to yourself. Look, I'm going to go up even higher to try and make it blend just that little bit more. And I'd say that's probably just fine. Now I am going to get some cadmium red on my palette because it's very red down here, isn't it? So let's just put a tiny bit of cadmium red on the palette. And I'm going to dip into cadmium red and burnt sienna. Those two colours will give us the most beautiful deep red. We can even take a touch of magenta as well. They will give us the most beautiful deep red shade. We're going to go down here like that, bring that right across. A bit more cadmium red. And what I'm also going to do is, there's a bit of an orange kind of around the sun. I don't know if you can spot that on the photograph, but there's this beautiful kind of orange, almost like a halo just around the sun. Should I try and recreate that for you? I'm just thinking now, without not being too complicated with the whole thing, I might try and recreate that colour for you. So I'm cleaning my brush now, I'm just getting all that colour off my brush onto my tissue. And I'm now going to mix a nice rich orange with some cadmium yellow. And I'm drying my brush really well. I need a dry brush for this, okay? Really, really well. Cadmium yellow, cadmium red. That gives us a nice rich deep orange. But I think I go more red. I'm going to bring that right across the centre, look. And I'm going to just soften it out left to right. That'll give us a nice rich spot just in the centre of our painting, won't it? Okay, isn't that nice? Nice rich spot. And that's it. We're finished with all of that. All we have to do is put in this beautiful sun. What I like to do with a sun like that is, I generally, this works for me all the time now, I just take a little bit of tissue, okay? And let me just check I'm checking the saturation. I think the saturation on my camera is very, very rich. For some reason, it seems very rich. I'm going to go up slightly with that. I do just generally take a little bit of tissue, dab some turpentine into that, okay, and just wipe off where our sun is. That will make it much easier to paint it on afterwards, all right? Trying to, paint over that colour is going to be very slow and tedious. I just find by rubbing it off first, it does help. I mean, even at that, you probably would just get away with doing that and leaving it as it is. It looks like a sun, doesn't it? I mean, if we got it nice and circular, we probably would get away with leaving it as it is, but I like to add a little bit of colour. I mean, even that looks okay, doesn't it? You would think so from where you are. I mean, it doesn't look too bad, does it, for a sun? But I would like to add a little bit of brightness into that. So I'm going to get a little brush, a little flat brush, okay, soft brush again, cadmium yellow and a little white. And I'm just going to pop a little bit of that in there. I'm going to soften it outwards very gently. Now when I get to the outside section, I'm going to just add a little bit of cadmium yellow on its own around the outside. Very gently, the flat of your brush, just kind of dragging the paint very gently around, and I'm softening that colour into the orange. I'm just kind of running it along where they meet very gently with my brush, okay? Just trying to get a little bit of a circle. It's never going to be perfect, is it? Then I'll just soften the centre. Now I don't know if this is completely round. It looks a little bit funny to me, perhaps. We could make it a bit more round. But look, that's actually not bad. Then I might take my soft brush and dab that around very gently, just to soften it outwards, you see. It just kind of softens the brush marks. Now I go back in one last time with some yellow and some white, just around the centre, and then soften it out a little bit. You can now, if you wish, if you want to go for a real pop of colour, you can just put almost pure white just in the centre, look like this. And that will really pop in the centre, won't it? So that's what I would do. I'm just going to make this a bit more round because some of the shape has gone. I'm just going to go around it, barely touching the canvas with my brush. I'm barely touching now, almost like I'm holding a feather. Okay, I go with that. And there we are, sun finished. After this, my friends, it's all very, very simple. I'm just going to go black down here. So, a little bit of thinners, pick up some black. If you wanted to add a bit of colour, you could maybe add some magenta into that. Let's just cover this. You can see how wet this paint is. I have a lot of thinners in this, look. It's almost like watercolour. You can see that? Very, very wet. This is only just to demonstrate to you, that's all. I'll pop in a little bit of burnt sienna with magenta up around the top. Okay. Because as it goes off in the distance, it's going to get slightly warmer as it goes towards the sun. So we'll just add a little bit of warmth into it as it goes off. And after this then, I simply work in my colour thicker and thicker as it goes. So I'm going to take some burnt sienna and some magenta, maybe a touch of cadmium red, and I'm going to go up to the top here and I'm just going to create a little bit of a fuzziness where this may, let's say, disappears off into the distance in little grasses and that kind of stuff, but it gets nice and warm, doesn't it? So a bit of cadmium red, look, just dab it off, make it almost disappear, dab, 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 up into the sky, just allow it to disappear. Make it lovely and soft and fuzzy. And then as you come down, we start getting much thicker black burnt sienna. And now I'm putting on thicker paint, just paint on its own. There's no thinners in this, okay? Black and burnt sienna. I just want to create a very black colour down here. There's no shape, there's no grasses going through this or anything like that. It's just completely black. Now as it goes up, I'm going to start fading it slightly. I'm going to even create some grasses and soften them together, you see. You can soften the colours together just by flicking your brush upwards where they meet. And that gives you a nice kind of transition from a dark into that lighter colour way off in the distance. Now I go right into my black and I come down and just cover any bit of white canvas that I can see through the paint, just to make sure it is just black, okay? Completely black. But you can add colour to this if you want at home. You can add a bit of pink or brown or something. You could even go burnt umber or something like that as well. That would be nice. Now, I'm just going to soften very gently across that with my brush, just to get it nice and soft. Getting rid of all the strokes, brush marks, etc. And there we are. So we are pretty much done with our sky, the bottom. All we have left is these little bits of grasses that are coming up. I'm going to grab some black paint. There we go, a tiny bit of black. I think this is going to be just lamp black on its own, nothing else. Grab yourselves a small thin brush, a very small pointy brush, whatever you have. Let me see what I can find here now. I should have a couple lying around. This will do fine. Let's mix up a nice thin watery colour. Just black. Come down here, look. Take some thinners, get a bit of black, mix a nice bit of black just there. And I'm just simply going to go something like that. And we can make this whatever we like. It's completely up to ourselves. We can, you know, we can make it whatever we want. I'm just going up and I'm kind of turning them. Look, I'm flicking them around in little hooks. That kind of a feeling. That's all I'm doing. Let's get a bit more black, a little bit of thinners. Make a nice puddle of that there. We go another one here. Then I'm going to come over to the other side. We have a couple of nice ones popping through the sun, don't we? And that then breaks up the sun. Okay? So we just keep going like this, and you can put all your own stuff into this, okay? You can make it your own. Let's put a couple of thick blades coming up like that, crossing in front of each other. Some coming into the painting, some going out of the painting, okay? Then we come to the focal point, which is these big reeds coming up. Let's just go like this. Okay, don't be shy with your lines, just go for it. Just grab the paint and go for it. And I'll put one more, just at an angle, like that. All right. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use the same brush. I'm just going to take a lot of thick paint on my brush. All right, just load your brush with some black, and I'm going to zoom in slightly for you for this. Let's just take the paint and just go like this. See what I'm doing? I'm just flicking it left and right. Just to create all of those little things there. That's all, as simple as that. Left and right, bring them to a point. And this is only just, I'm just doing this now very quickly just to, as a demonstration, okay? But you can absolutely take your time. You have a couple coming out as well from the sides, you see? You can, by all means, just take your time when you're doing this. I'm going to go to this one over here. And I'm simply going to just put a couple of flicks down like that. Some may be thicker than others. And then we might have one coming out like this. And then coming to a point. I find the secret with this is maybe don't overdo it, okay? Don't have loads all over the place. Sometimes less is more with these kind of pictures. Less is more. At the end of the day, it's about the feeling that you're trying to capture. Do you understand? Does that make sense? It's just about a feeling that you're trying to capture in a painting. And I'm just being very quick now with this. You see how quick I'm being? I'm just kind of splashing them on with the brush. You know, no need to be absolutely perfect. Let's grab some more paint. Let's do this one. Again, just flicking from the left and the right. That's all it is. Left, right, you see? And I'll stop there. leave a nice long kind of a stalk. Now you can bring extra ones off of that as well. So let's say you wanted to go like this, okay? And then bring extra ones off of that to a point. And it's just basically this all the way along. I'm going to go thicker with this one. This looks nice and thick in the middle, doesn't it? It's just nice and bunched up. So I go a little bit thicker with that one. One or two stray ones coming off. And go up at an angle like this. Just flicking the brush very randomly. And you can go as much or as little as you like with all of this. I'm just going to keep this very straightforward and very simple. I'm not even looking at the reference photograph, I'll be honest. I'm just popping in a couple of bits here and there, which I think would help, and maybe a couple of small ones, darken some of those. One or two here coming into the painting perhaps. One or two coming in up here. You see? And then I'm just going to sit all those down into that dark underneath. I'm just going to go along with some black and just dab down underneath all of those very randomly, just to kind of help, you see, just help bring them down into the darkness underneath, and then gently tap to soften it all through. You can even go up and soften it right up into them if you like, to create more texture, look. And my friends, I'm calling that finished. I could have made this, you know, much more complicated and went into a lot more detail, but I don't think I need to be honest. I'm just going to thicken some of the bottoms of those stalks with some black. Just to make them that little bit thicker. And we are done. And there we go, my friends. Tutorial. Now, it was a nice, simple, very nice and simple painting, wasn't it? But I think overall, I think that looks quite nice. We just fix this here. There we go. And there we are. How does that look? A nice simple little tutorial. I hope you've enjoyed watching that and put that kind of technique into practice. You know, just keeping it nice and simple. Don't overcomplicate everything. Just grab a little brush and do some flicks and be very random with it all. I think that's the best way to paint. Thank you for watching. I hope you've learned a little bit from this tutorial. I am sorry if I have waffled on a bit. I do tend to get carried away with my chatting because I just love talking to you all. I'm going to go and grab a nice coffee. I'm going to stick a frame around this. I think that would look very nice with a bright white. In fact, I have a bright white frame, just finished, just made. There we are. I make these frames myself. I've had so many questions about my frames, how I make them and all of that. I am going to do a tutorial someday in the next couple of weeks on my frame. I'll make a frame for you and show you, but it's done very cheaply with just basic tools, okay? You might need to purchase a router, if you know what a router is. But these are ones I make myself. Let's pop it on. I'll hold it up. And there we are. Doesn't that look very nice? You know, it's all about a simple subject, but just very eye-catching colours and frame. That's what would grab your eye. This would probably grab my attention on a wall more so than something with huge amounts of detail, with buildings and trees and all of that. Something simple like this would catch my eye much quicker. So I'm very happy with that. Very happy. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be back next week with another tutorial. We'll take it up a notch, perhaps. Do subscribe if you haven't done so. If you have, thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much to my patrons as well. I sincerely appreciate your support. Pop over if you want to see lots of extra tutorials in depth. I'll be back next week. Have a great day, my friends. Take care and happy painting. God bless.